Hey there, friends. Before we jump in, tell me in the comments where are you watching from today? And if you love a good story where the underdog comes out on top, hit that subscribe button. Now, here's a question to chew on: have you ever had a nosy neighbor who thought they owned the whole street? Stick around, because this one's a doozy. It all started on a sunny Saturday. I'm just an average guy, let's call me Jake, tinkering in my yard with a DIY sprinkler I'd built from scratch. Nothing fancy, just some pipes and a hose to keep my grass green. But oh no, that was too much for Linda, the HOA queen of our little neighborhood. She strutted around like she was the sheriff, always glaring at anything that didn't fit her perfect rules. Me. I was just the quiet new guy, minding my own business. Or so she thought. Little did Linda know, I had a trick up my sleeve she'd never see coming. Picture this: it's a bright, warm day. The sun is shining, birds are chirping, and I'm outside, happy as can be. I love making things with my hands, and this sprinkler was my latest project. It wasn't big or loud, just a little gadget to water my lawn. I'd spent all morning putting it together, twisting pipes and taping them tight. It looked a bit funny, sure, but it worked. I turned it on, and tiny sprays of water shot out, sparkling in the sunlight. I smiled, proud of my work. My grass was going to look so green soon. But then, here comes Linda. She lived 2 houses down, and she was the kind of lady who always had something to say. Her hair was piled up high, and she wore big sunglasses even when it wasn't that sunny. She walked like she owned the place, head up, nose in the air. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. If your mailbox was a little crooked or your flowers weren't perfect, Linda would notice. And she'd tell you about it, whether you wanted to hear it or not. That day, she spotted me right away. I was kneeling in the dirt, fixing a loose pipe on my sprinkler, when I heard her shoes clicking on the sidewalk. Click, click, click. I looked up, and there she was, standing at the edge of my yard. Her arms were crossed, and her lips were pressed tight together. She didn't say hi or wave. Nope. She just stared at me, then at my sprinkler, like it was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen. "What is that?" she said, her voice loud and sharp. I stood up, brushing dirt off my hands. "It's a sprinkler," I told her, keeping my tone nice and easy. "I made it myself." She didn't like that answer. Not one bit. She took a step closer, pointing at it like it was a monster. "That thing doesn't belong here," she said. "It's messy. It's ugly. We have rules, you know." I nodded, still smiling. "I know about the rules, Linda," I said. "But it's just a sprinkler. It's not hurting anyone." That made her mad. Her cheeks turned pink, and she huffed like a dragon about to breathe fire. "Not hurting anyone," she repeated. "It's ruining the look of the street. I'm in charge of the HOA, and I say it's got to go. Now, let me tell you about the HOA. That's short for Homeowners Association. It's a group that makes rules for our neighborhood, like how tall your grass can be or what color your house can be painted." Linda was the boss of it, and she loved being the boss. She'd walk around with a clipboard, checking on everyone, writing down anything she didn't like. Most people just went along with it because they didn't want trouble. But me? I wasn't scared of Linda. I'd only been here a few weeks, and I wasn't looking to fight. Still, I wasn't going to let her push me around either. She kept going. "I'm going to tell the HOA about this," she said, wagging her finger at me. "And if that doesn't work, I'll call someone who can make you take it down." I shrugged. "Okay, Linda," I said. "You do what you think is right." She didn't expect me to be so calm. It threw her off. She blinked at me, then turned around and stomped back to her house, muttering under her breath. I watched her go, shaking my head. Most guys might have gotten mad or yelled back. But not me. I had a secret, something Linda didn't know. See, I wasn't just some random guy who liked building stuff. There was more to me than that. And soon, Linda was going to find out exactly who she was messing with. Let's rewind a bit. I moved into this neighborhood not long ago. It's a quiet place, nice houses, neat lawns, kids riding bikes. I liked it right away. I bought a little house at the end of the street, with a big yard perfect for projects like my sprinkler. I'm the kind of person who keeps to himself. I wave at neighbors, say hi, But I don't talk much. People probably thought I was shy or boring. That's fine by me. I don't need everyone knowing my business. When I got here, I noticed Linda pretty quick. She was hard to miss. The first day, she came over with a big fake smile and a list of rules. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she'd said, handing me a paper. "We like things a certain way around here. No loud music. No weird decorations. Keep your yard clean." I took the paper and said thanks. She seemed happy with that until she saw my sprinkler a few weeks later. The thing is, I wasn't here by accident. I had a reason for picking this street, this house. But I couldn't tell anyone, not yet. Linda thought she had me figured out. She saw a quiet guy with a goofy sprinkler and decided I was easy to boss around. Boy, was she wrong. Every time she glared at me or complained, I just smiled and let her talk. Why? Because I knew something she didn't. And that secret was going to change everything. Back to that Saturday. After Linda left, I went inside to grab a drink. It was hot out, and I needed a break. I stood at my kitchen window, sipping water, watching the street. My sprinkler was still going, spraying little arcs of water onto the grass. It wasn't pretty, but it did the job. I liked it that way, simple and useful. Linda, though. She hated it. And I knew she wasn't done with me yet. Sure enough, about an hour later, I saw her again. She was out on her porch, talking on the phone. She kept looking my way, pointing at my yard. I couldn't hear her, but I could guess what she was saying. "There's this new guy, he's breaking the rules, we need to do something." I chuckled to myself. Let her call whoever she wanted. It wasn't going to go the way she thought. The day went on. I mowed my lawn, pulled some weeds, and kept tinkering with my sprinkler. Neighbors walked by, some waved, some didn't. A couple of kids stopped to watch the water spray. "Cool," one of them said. I grinned. "Thanks, buddy," I replied. At least someone liked it. But Linda? She was plotting. I could feel it. She wasn't the type to let things go. By late afternoon, the sun was starting to dip. I was sweaty and tired, but happy with my day's work. I sat on my porch with a lemonade, just relaxing. That's when I saw Linda again. She came marching down the street, her phone in her hand, a big smirk on her face. She stopped right in front of my yard and stared at me. "I called them," she said, all proud. "They're coming to deal with you." "Who's coming?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. She smirked even bigger. "You'll see," she said. Then she turned and walked away, like she'd just won a prize. I sipped my lemonade, not worried at all. Linda thought she was so smart, calling someone to shut me down. But here's the thing, she had no idea what was really going on. She thought I was just a guy with a sprinkler. She didn't know I was waiting for something too. Something big. Let me tell you a little more about myself. I'm not loud or flashy. I don't drive a fancy car or wear fancy clothes. I'm just Jake, short hair, old jeans, and a toolbox full of stuff I like to fix. People see me and think, "Oh, he's nice, but he's nothing special." That's exactly what I want them to think. It makes my job easier. What job? Well, I'll get to that soon. For now, let's just say I'm good at watching people. And I'd been watching Linda since the day I moved in. See, Linda wasn't just bossy. She was sneaky too. I'd heard whispers from other neighbors, little things that didn't add up. Money missing from the HOA fund. Extra fees nobody could explain. People were too scared to say much, but I noticed. I'm good at noticing. And that sprinkler? It wasn't just for my grass. It was my excuse to be outside, keeping an eye on things. Linda thought she was catching me breaking rules. She didn't know I was catching her. So there I was, sitting on my porch, waiting. Linda had made her move, and now it was my turn. The street was quiet, no cars, no kids, just the sound of my sprinkler hissing away. I took another sip of lemonade and looked up at the sky. It was turning orange and pink, a pretty sunset. I love days like that, calm and peaceful. But I knew it wouldn't stay calm for long. Linda had called someone, and they were on their way. She thought she'd won. She had no clue she'd just lost. What was my secret? Why wasn't I worried? Hang on, friends, I'm not telling you yet. That's the fun part of the story. You've got to stick with me to find out. Let's just say I wasn't as new or as ordinary as Linda thought. I had a plan, and it was already in motion. She could call the HOA, the cops, the president himself, it didn't matter. Because when the truth came out, Linda was the one who'd be in trouble, not me. Think about it, have you ever met someone who acted big and tough, but deep down, they were hiding something? That was Linda. She loved her power, loved telling people what to do. But power like that, it's shaky. It only works if nobody pushes back. And me? I was about to push. Not with yelling or fighting, but with something smarter. Something she'd never expect. The minutes ticked by. I finished my lemonade and set the glass down. The sprinkler kept going, spraying water in little circles. I leaned back, hands behind my head, and waited. Linda was probably at her house, gloating, thinking she'd scared me. Maybe she was telling her friends about the awful new guy and his ugly sprinkler. Let her talk. Let her think she was in charge. The longer she believed that, the better my plan would work. Then I heard a low rumble. A car engine. I sat up, squinting down the street. Headlights flashed as a vehicle turned the corner. It was getting dark now, and the lights cut through the shadows. Linda's front door flew open, and she ran out, waving her arms like she'd won a race. "They're here," she shouted, loud enough for the whole block to hear. She looked at me, smirking again. "Told you." I stood up, stretching my arms. The car rolled closer, a police cruiser, blue and white, with lights on top. Linda practically danced with glee. "See? I said I'd fix this," she called. The car stopped right in front of my house, and an officer stepped out. He was tall, with a serious face, holding a notepad. Linda rushed over, talking fast. "Officer, it's him. That sprinkler, it's against the rules. You need to." The cop held up a hand, cutting her off. "Hold on, ma'am," he said. He didn't even look at my sprinkler. Instead, he turned to me. "You Jake?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, that's me." Linda froze, her mouth open. The cop didn't smile, but I could tell he wasn't here for what she thought. "Good," he said. "We need to talk." Linda's smirk was gone now. She blinked, confused. "Wait, what?" No, he's the problem. I called you." The cop ignored her, stepping closer to me. I stayed calm, hands in my pockets. Another car pulled up behind the first one, plain, no lights, just a dark sedan. Two more guys got out, wearing suits. Linda's eyes got wide. She didn't know it yet, but her big win was about to turn into her biggest mistake. And that, friends, is where the real story begins. What was I hiding? Why were the cops here, and why weren't they mad at me? You'll find out soon. This was just the start, the hook to pull you in. Linda thought she was the queen of the neighborhood, but she was about to learn she'd picked the wrong guy to mess with. Stick with me, because the next part, it's even better. Setting the conflict and tension. Linda was the kind of person who'd knock on your door if your trash can was out 5 minutes past pickup. She was always watching, always judging. If your grass was too long or your mailbox had a tiny dent, she'd be there, telling you to fix it. That day, she stormed over to my yard, arms crossed tight, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That thing in your yard," she snapped, pointing at my sprinkler like it was a crime scene. "It's an eyesore. I'm calling the HOA board and maybe the cops." I just smiled and nodded, keeping my cool. "Sure, Linda," I said. "You do what you gotta do." She didn't like that. Not one bit. Her face turned red, like a tomato about to burst, and she huffed off, stomping back to her house. She was already dialing her phone, her fingers moving fast. I could hear her whining to someone on the other end, something about standards and property values. Her voice was loud, carrying across the street. Most folks would have been mad, yelling back or getting upset. But me? I wasn't worried. Not even a little. See, I knew something she didn't, and it was gonna turn her world upside down. Let me paint the picture for you. It was still that sunny Saturday, the air warm and the sky blue. I'd been outside all morning, working on my sprinkler. It wasn't much, just some pipes and a hose I'd taped together, but I liked it. It sprayed water in little bursts, keeping my grass happy. I was proud of it, even if it looked a bit goofy. I was kneeling in the dirt, tightening a loose part, when Linda showed up. She didn't walk slow or quiet. No, she marched right over, her shoes making loud clicks on the pavement. Click, click, click. She stopped at the edge of my yard, glaring down at me. I stood up, brushing dirt off my knees. "Hi, Linda," I said, nice and friendly. But she wasn't here to be friendly. She pointed at my sprinkler, her finger shaking a little. "What is that?" she asked, like it was the worst thing she'd ever seen. "It's a sprinkler," I told her, keeping my voice calm. "I made it myself." Her eyes got narrow, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's ugly," she said. "It doesn't belong here. We have rules." She loved those rules. Linda was the boss of the HOA, the Homeowners Association. That's a group that tells everyone in the neighborhood how to keep their houses and yards. Linda took it super serious. She'd walk around with a clipboard, checking every little thing. If your fence was the wrong color or your dog barked too loud, she'd write it down and complain. People listened to her because she was loud and pushy. Nobody wanted her banging on their door or sending them mean letters. "I know about the rules," I said, still smiling. "But it's just a sprinkler. It's not hurting anyone." That's when she got mad, really mad. Her cheeks puffed out, and she took a big breath. "Not hurting anyone," she shouted. "It's ruining the whole street. It's messy and awful, and I won't stand for it." I shrugged. "Okay, Linda," I said. "Call whoever you want." That threw her off. She expected me to argue or beg her to stop. But I didn't. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, watching her. She blinked at me, surprised. Then she turned around and marched off, her phone already up to her ear. I could hear bits of what she said as she walked away. "There's this new guy, he's got this terrible thing in his yard, we can't let this happen." She sounded so sure of herself, like she was the queen and I was some troublemaker. I watched her go, her big hair bouncing with every step. She disappeared into her house, slamming the door behind her. The street got quiet again, just the sound of my sprinkler hissing away. Most people would have been nervous. I mean, who wants the HOA mad at them? Or the cops showing up? But I wasn't scared. Not even a tiny bit. Why? Because I had a secret. It was something big, something Linda didn't know. She thought she was in charge, thought she could boss me around like everyone else. But she was wrong. I wasn't just some guy with a sprinkler. There was more to me, way more, and soon, she'd find out. Let's talk about Linda for a second. She wasn't just nosy, she was mean about it. I'd only been in the neighborhood a few weeks, but I'd seen her in action. One time, she yelled at Mr. Carter, an old guy across the street, because his trash can was out too long. "It's Tuesday," she'd shouted. "Pickup was yesterday. Move it." Mr. Carter just nodded and dragged the can back, even though he could barely walk. Another time, she told Mrs. Lopez her flowers were too bright and against the rules. Mrs. Lopez looked sad but pulled them up anyway. That's how Linda was. She made people feel small. Me, though, I didn't care what she thought. I'd moved here with my little house and my big yard, and I was happy. I liked fixing things, like my sprinkler. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, and that's what mattered to me. Linda didn't see it that way. To her, my sprinkler was a problem, a big, ugly problem she had to fix. She didn't know it was part of something else, something I was keeping quiet about. After she left, I went back to my work. The sun was high now, and it was getting hot. I grabbed a rag from my pocket and wiped sweat off my face. My sprinkler was still going, spraying water in little arcs. I sat down on the grass for a minute, watching it. A couple of birds hopped by, pecking at the wet spots. It was peaceful. But I knew Linda wasn't done. She wasn't the type to let things go. She'd be back, or she'd send someone else to bother me. Sure enough, about an hour later, I saw her again. I was inside, getting a glass of water, when I peeked out my kitchen window. There she was, standing on her porch, phone in hand. She kept looking at my yard, then talking, then looking again. I couldn't hear her, but I could tell she was mad. Her arms were waving, and her face was all scrunched up. She pointed at my sprinkler a few times, like it was proof of something terrible. I sipped my water and smiled. Let her talk. Let her call whoever she wanted. It didn't matter. I went back outside, carrying my glass. The street was quiet, no cars, no kids, just me and my sprinkler. I set the glass down on my porch steps and grabbed my tools. I wanted to fix one more piece, a little leak where the hose met the pipe. I twisted it tight, and the leak stopped. Perfect. I stood up, hands on my hips, feeling good. That's when Linda came back. She didn't walk this time, she marched, faster than before. Her sunglasses were pushed up on her head, and her eyes were sharp. She stopped right at my fence, staring at me. I talked to the HOA, she said, her voice loud and proud. They agree with me. That thing has to go. I nodded, slow and easy. Okay, I said. What else? She crossed her arms again. And if you don't take it down, I'm calling the cops. This is serious. I tilted my head, still calm. The cops? I asked. For a sprinkler? She nodded hard. Yes. It's against the rules, and it's my job to keep this place nice. I didn't argue. I just said, all right, Linda. Go ahead. That made her pause. She wasn't used to people not fighting back. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish out of water. Then she spun around and stormed off again, muttering something I couldn't hear. I watched her go, leaning against my porch railing. The sprinkler kept spraying, little drops catching the sunlight. I wasn't mad or scared. Why should I be? Linda thought she was winning, thought she had me trapped. But she didn't know the truth. She didn't know I was ready for her and for whatever she brought next. See, I wasn't just tinkering in my yard for fun. There was a reason I was here, a reason I'd built that sprinkler. And Linda? She was about to walk right into it. Let's back up a bit. I'd been watching Linda since I moved in. Not in a creepy way, just paying attention. She ran the neighborhood like it was her kingdom. She'd boss people around, make rules, and act like everyone had to obey. Most folks did, because it was easier than arguing. But I'd heard things, little whispers from neighbors. Stuff about money disappearing. Fees going up for no reason. People were annoyed, but too nervous to say it out loud. I didn't say anything either. I just listened. My sprinkler wasn't just a project. It was a way to stay outside, to keep my eyes on things. Linda thought it was some junky mess breaking her rules. She didn't know it was part of my plan. Every time she complained, I let her. Every time she pointed or yelled, I smiled. Why? Because I was waiting. Waiting for her to make a mistake. And calling the cops? That might just be the mistake I needed. The afternoon went on. I stayed outside, messing with my tools, keeping busy. Linda's house was quiet now, no more phone calls I could see. But I knew she was up to something. She wasn't the type to give up. The sun started to dip, turning the sky orange. I grabbed my water glass and took a long drink. The air was cooler now, a nice breeze blowing through. My sprinkler was still going, and my grass looked greener already. I liked that. It made me feel good. Then I saw her again. Linda came out of her house, walking fast. She had that smirk on her face, the one that said she thought she'd won. She stopped in the middle of the street, looking at me. I did it, she called. I called them. They're coming. I set my glass down and stood up. Who's coming? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She laughed, short and sharp. You'll see, she said. Then she turned and went back inside, slamming her door. I sat back down, waiting. The street was still quiet, but not for long. Linda had made her move. She thought she was so smart, thought she'd scared me. But I wasn't scared. I was ready. See, I had something she didn't expect, something big. And when it came out, Linda's little game would be over. She thought she was turning my world upside down. She didn't know hers was about to flip instead. What was my secret? Why was I so calm? You'll find out soon, friends. This is where the tension builds, where Linda pushes, and I push back, but not how she thinks. She thought she was the boss, thought she could control me. But I had a trick up my sleeve, and it was almost time to show it. Stick with me, the next part's gonna be wild. Rising action and small revelations. The next few hours were quiet, too quiet. I kept working on my sprinkler, tweaking it just right. The sun was still up, shining bright, and I was out in my yard, making sure everything was perfect. My sprinkler wasn't fancy, just some pipes and a hose, but it worked great. I twisted a little knob here, taped a loose spot there, and watched the water spray in tiny bursts. It made me happy to see my grass getting wet and green. I love fixing things, and this was my little project. But even though it was peaceful, I had a feeling something was coming. Something big. Then I saw it, Linda peeking over her fence. She wasn't being sneaky about it, not really. Her head popped up, her big sunglasses glinting in the light. She had a notebook in one hand and a pen in the other, scribbling fast like she was building a case against me. I squinted at her, wondering what she was writing. Then snap, she pulled out her phone and took a picture of my sprinkler. I couldn't believe it. She was acting like a detective in a movie, trying to catch a bad guy. I waved at her, nice and friendly, giving her a big smile. But she ducked down fast, like she didn't want me to see her. Too late, Linda, I already did. What was she up to? I had a hunch, but I wasn't ready to tip my hand. Tipping your hand means showing what you know too soon, and I wasn't going to do that. Not yet. I kept my cool, pretending I didn't care. I bent down and fiddled with my sprinkler some more, turning a pipe just a little. The water sprayed higher, and I grinned. Let her take her pictures. Let her write her notes. I wasn't worried. See, I had a secret, something she didn't know, and it was going to change everything. The day went on, slow and lazy. I stayed outside, keeping busy. I pulled a few weeds from my garden, swept some dirt off my porch, and checked my sprinkler again. Every now and then, I'd glance at Linda's house. Her curtains twitched sometimes, like she was still watching me. I didn't mind. I waved again, just to mess with her. She didn't wave back. She was too busy plotting, I bet, thinking of ways to get me in trouble. That's how Linda was. She didn't like me or my sprinkler, and she wasn't going to stop until she won. Or so she thought. By afternoon, the sun was lower, and the air felt a little cooler. I was sweaty from working, so I grabbed a cold drink from inside. Lemonade, my favorite. I stood on my porch, sipping it, watching the street. My sprinkler was still going, hissing and spraying. A couple of kids rode by on bikes, laughing and shouting. One of them pointed at the water and said, "Cool." I smiled and nodded. "Thanks." I called back. At least someone liked it. Linda sure didn't. Then I heard a low rumble. A car engine. I set my glass down and looked down the street. A patrol car rolled up, slow and steady. It was white with blue stripes and a light on top, a police car. My heart beat a little faster, but I didn't panic. I knew Linda must have called 911, thinking she'd won. She'd said she'd call the cops, and here they were. Right on time. I leaned against my porch railing, hands in my pockets, waiting to see what would happen. Linda came bursting out of her house like she'd been waiting for this moment all day. She marched across the street, her arms swinging, a big smug smile on her face. She looked so proud, like she'd just caught a thief red-handed. "Officer," she yelled, pointing at my yard. "That's him. That's the guy breaking every rule in the book." The cop stepped out of the car, tall and serious. He had a black uniform and a badge that shone in the sunlight. He glanced at my sprinkler, then at me. Linda kept talking, her voice loud and fast. "That thing, it's awful. It's against HOA rules. You need to do something." I stayed calm. I didn't move, didn't say a word, just watched. My hands stayed in my pockets, and I kept my face relaxed. Linda didn't notice, but I did. The cop wasn't here for me. His eyes flicked past my sprinkler, like it didn't matter. Then his radio crackled, loud and scratchy. I couldn't hear all of it, but I caught a few words, something about a suspect and check it out. His face didn't change, but he turned his head a little, listening. Linda was still pointing and talking, but the cop wasn't paying attention to her anymore. His eyes weren't even on my sprinkler now, they were on her. I smirked a tiny bit, just to myself. Linda was too busy yelling to see it. She thought she'd called the cops on me, thought she'd finally got me in big trouble. But something was off. Why wasn't the cop asking me questions? Why wasn't he telling me to turn off my sprinkler? I had a feeling, a good one. My hunch was getting stronger. This wasn't about me at all. Linda didn't know it yet, but she just stepped into something she couldn't control. Let me tell you more about what was going on. See, I wasn't just some guy who moved here to fix up a house. I'd been watching Linda for a while, ever since I got to this neighborhood. She was the boss of the HOA, sure, but she was sneaky too. I'd heard things from neighbors, little bits here and there. Money was missing from the HOA fund. People had to pay extra fees, but nobody knew why. Linda always had excuses: new flowers for the park, a better sign for the street, but it didn't add up. Neighbors whispered about it, but they were too scared to ask her straight out. Me. I wasn't scared. I was curious. That's why I built the sprinkler. It wasn't just to water my grass. It was my excuse to be outside all the time, keeping an eye on Linda's house. I'd see her come and go, see who she talked to, see what she did. She thought I was just a quiet guy who liked messing with pipes. She didn't know I was watching her every move. Every time she peeked at me or complained, I let her. I didn't fight back. Why? Because I was waiting for her to slip up, and calling the cops might just be that slip. Back to the moment. The cop stood there, one hand on his radio, the other holding a notepad. Linda was still talking, waving her arms. He's new here, she said. He doesn't care about our rules. That sprinkler, it's a mess. You have to make him take it down. The cop nodded a little, but he didn't write anything down. He looked at me instead. You live here? He asked, his voice deep and steady. I nodded. Yeah, I said. That's my house. He glanced at the sprinkler again, then back at Linda. She didn't like that. What are you waiting for? She snapped. Arrest him or something. The cop raised an eyebrow, just a tiny bit. Ma'am, he said, calm down. I'm not here about a sprinkler. Linda's mouth dropped open. What? She said, her voice squeaky now. But I called you. I told you about him. The cop didn't answer right away. His radio crackled again, and he pressed a button on it, listening. Linda stared at him, then at me, then back at him. She looked confused and a little mad. I stayed quiet, watching it all. The cop turned to me again. What's your name? He asked. Jake, I said, keeping it simple. He nodded, like that was all he needed. Then he looked at Linda. And you're Linda Grayson, he said. She blinked. Yes, she said, slower now. Why? The cop didn't smile. We need to talk, he said. Not about him. About you. Linda's face changed fast. Her smug smile was gone, and her eyes got wide. Me, she said. What do you mean, me? The cop didn't explain. He just stepped closer to her, holding his notepad tighter. That's when I heard another sound: tires on the road. I looked past the patrol car and saw a second vehicle pulling up. It wasn't a police car this time. It was a plain black car, no lights, no markings. Two guys got out, wearing suits and sunglasses. They didn't look like regular cops. They looked different. Serious. Linda saw them too. She took a step back, her hands dropping to her sides. What's going on? She asked, her voice shaky now. The cop didn't answer her. He turned to me instead. You good here? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, I said. I'm fine. He gave me a quick look like he knew something, then turned back to Linda. The two guys in suits walked over, slow and calm. One of them pulled out a badge and showed it to her. Linda Grayson, he said, we've got some questions. She froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at me, then at the cop, then at the guys in suits. This is crazy, she finally said. I called you about him. About that stupid sprinkler. The cop shook his head. Like I said, ma'am, this isn't about a sprinkler. Linda's face went pale, like all the color drained out of it. She didn't know what to say. For once, she was quiet. I leaned against my porch, watching it all unfold. My sprinkler kept spraying, little drops hitting the grass. The kids on bikes were gone now, and the street was still. The cop and the guys in suits stood around Linda, talking low so I couldn't hear. She kept shaking her head, saying, "No, no, this is a mistake." But they weren't listening. They were focused on her, not me. Here's where it gets good. See, I wasn't just Jake, the new guy with the sprinkler. I'd moved here for a reason, a big one. Those guys in suits? They weren't random. They were part of my plan. I'd been working with them, quiet and sneaky, watching Linda for weeks. She'd been up to no good, stealing money from the HOA, lying to neighbors, acting like she owned everything. I had proof notes, pictures, even some recordings. My sprinkler was just a cover, a way to stay outside and keep track of her. And when she called 911, thinking she'd get me in trouble, she accidentally got herself caught instead. Linda didn't notice the little things. Like how I'd wave at her every day, keeping her annoyed but not suspicious. Or how I'd talk to neighbors, asking small questions about the HOA. "Hey, what's with those fees?" I'd say, casual and friendly. They'd grumble, tell me bits and pieces, and I'd write it down later. Linda thought I was clueless. She didn't know I was building a case too way better than her silly notes about my sprinkler. The cop's radio crackled again, and one of the suit guys nodded at him. They were talking about Linda now, about her money tricks, her lies. She'd been so busy trying to boss me around that she didn't see me watching her back. And that 911 call? It was the perfect mistake. The cops were already looking into her, thanks to me. When she called them, they decided it was time to move. She thought she'd trapped me. Nope, she'd trapped herself. Linda started arguing, her voice getting loud again. "This is ridiculous," she yelled. "I'm the HOA president. I keep this place nice. He's the problem." She pointed at me, her finger shaking. The cop sighed. "Ma'am, we'll talk about it at the station," he said. The suit guys stepped closer, and one of them put a hand on her arm. "Let's go," he said, calm but firm. Linda yanked her arm back. "No. You can't do this," she shouted. But they could. And they did. I stayed where I was, hands still in my pockets. The sprinkler hissed behind me, steady and quiet. Linda kept yelling as they led her to the black car. "This is a mistake. I'll sue you all," she said. The neighbors started peeking out now, curtains moving, doors cracking open. They'd heard her shouting and wanted to see what was up. I waved at a few of them, nice and easy. They waved back, confused but curious. The cop stayed behind for a second, looking at me. "Good work," he said, low so Linda couldn't hear. I nodded. "Thanks," I said. He tipped his hat a little, then walked to his car. The suit guys were putting Linda in the back seat of the black car now. She was still talking, but it was muffled. The door shut, and her voice cut off. The car started up, and just like that, they drove away. Linda was gone. The street went quiet again. The cop got in his patrol car and followed the black car, lights flashing but no siren. I stood there, watching them go. My sprinkler kept going, spraying water like nothing had happened. I picked up my lemonade glass and took a sip. It was warm now, but I didn't care. I'd done what I came here to do, at least part of it. Linda thought she'd beat me. She didn't know I'd been one step ahead the whole time. What was my secret? How did I pull this off? I'll tell you more soon, friends. This was just the build-up, the part where Linda's plans started falling apart. She thought she was so smart, taking pictures, calling the cops. But every move she made brought her closer to trouble. And me? I was just getting started. The next part's even bigger, stick around, because it's gonna blow your mind. Climax and big reveal. Here's where it gets good. The cop turned to Linda and said, "Ma'am, we're not here about a sprinkler." Her jaw dropped, like it hit the ground. "What?" she sputtered, her voice all high and squeaky. She looked like someone had just pulled a rug out from under her feet. That's when a second car pulled up unmarked, with tinted windows so dark you couldn't see inside. Two guys in suits stepped out, moving slow and calm. Their badges flashed in the sunlight, shiny and gold. Linda Grayson, one of them asked, his voice deep and serious. She nodded, still confused, her eyes darting around. We need to talk. Now, he said, and there was no arguing with that tone. Linda's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds. She blinked fast, like she couldn't believe what was happening. Talk about what? She asked, her hands flapping like little bird wings. The cop didn't answer. The guys in suits didn't smile. They just stood there, looking at her, waiting. The street was super quiet now, no birds, no kids, just the sound of my sprinkler hissing away in the background. I stayed on my porch, leaning against the railing, watching it all. Linda thought she'd called the cops to get me in trouble. Oh boy, was she wrong. Turns out, I wasn't just Jake the new guy. I'd moved here undercover, working with the police on a neighborhood scam Linda had been running for months, overcharging HOA fees and pocketing the cash. Yep, that's right, I wasn't some random dude who liked building sprinklers. I was here on purpose, sneaky and quiet, helping the cops catch a thief. And that thief? It was Linda. My sprinkler? A perfect excuse to keep an eye on her without raising suspicion. She thought it was just a messy pile of pipes. She didn't know it was my cover, my way to stay outside and watch her every move. Linda's 911 call was the last nail in her coffin. She just handed me the chance to wrap it all up. The suits had been waiting for her to slip, and boy, did she. See, I'd been working with them for weeks, collecting little bits of proof. Notes about weird fees. Stories from neighbors who didn't know where their money went. Even a few pictures of Linda meeting shady people behind the park. I'd pass it all to the cops, quiet as a mouse, and they'd build their case. That sprinkler gave me the perfect reason to be out in my yard, day after day, watching her without her knowing. Now, let's rewind a bit so you get the full picture. When I moved here, I didn't tell anyone who I really was. I just said, "Hi, I'm Jake," and acted like a regular guy. I bought this little house with a big yard, perfect for my plan. I'd wave at neighbors, fix my sprinkler, and keep to myself. People thought I was shy or boring. That was fine by me. The less they noticed, the better I could work. Linda saw me as some annoying new kid who didn't follow her rules. She had no idea I was watching her closer than she ever watched me. The scam was simple but sneaky. Linda was the HOA boss, right? She'd tell everyone they had to pay extra money for stuff like fixing the playground or painting the street signs. But here's the thing, those things never got fixed. The playground was still rusty. The signs were still peeling. So where did the money go? Into Linda's pockets. She'd take it, stash it away, and act like nothing was wrong. Neighbors grumbled, but they didn't fight her. She was too loud, too bossy. They just paid and hoped she'd leave them alone. I heard about it my first week here. Old Mr. Carter, the guy across the street, was watering his flowers one day. I walked over, said hi, and asked how he liked the neighborhood. "It's nice," he said, "but that Linda, she's always asking for more money. I don't know what she does with it." He shook his head and went back to his flowers. Then Mrs. Lopez, down the block, told me the same thing. $50 last month for new benches, she said. I don't see any benches. Little by little, I put it together. Linda was stealing and she'd been doing it for a long time. So I got to work. I called a friend, a cop I knew from way back. "Hey," I said, "there's something fishy here. Can you check it out?" He said yes, but they needed proof. That's where I came in. I moved here, set up my sprinkler, and started watching. Every day, I'd be outside, tinkering with pipes, looking busy. Linda would walk by, glare at me, and I'd wave. She'd huff and keep going. She didn't know I was taking notes, too, better notes than hers. I'd see her leave her house with big bags, meet people in the park, come back with nothing. Suspicious, right? I thought so. Back to that moment with the cop and the suits. Linda was freaking out now. "This is a mistake," she yelled, her voice all wobbly. "I didn't do anything. He's the problem." She pointed at me, her finger shaking like a leaf in the wind. The cop shook his head. "We've got evidence, ma'am," he said. "Bank records. Complaints. Witnesses." Linda's eyes got huge. "Witnesses," she squeaked. "What witnesses?" The suit guy with the badge stepped forward. "People in this neighborhood," he said. "They've been talking." Linda spun around, looking at the houses. Curtains twitched. Neighbors were watching. She didn't know it, but they'd been fed up with her for ages. I'd talk to them, quiet and careful, asking questions. "Hey, what's Linda like?" I'd say. "Ever notice anything weird?" They'd spill little bits enough for the cops to dig deeper. Linda thought she had everyone scared. She didn't know some of them were ready to tell the truth. The suit guy pulled out a paper from his pocket. "This is a warrant," he said. "We're taking you in to ask some questions." Linda's mouth flapped open and shut, like a fish on land. "A warrant," she said. "For what?" The cop stepped closer. "Theft," he said. "Fraud. Taking money that wasn't yours." Linda shook her head hard. "No. No way. I didn't." She stopped, like she couldn't think of what to say next. The suits didn't care. They'd heard enough. I stayed on my porch, sipping my warm lemonade. The sprinkler kept going, spraying little arcs of water. Linda looked at me, her face all twisted up. "You," she shouted. "This is your fault." I didn't say anything, just shrugged. She didn't know how right she was. This was my fault because I'd planned it. I'd watched her, waited for her to mess up, and now here we were. Her 911 call about my sprinkler? It was the perfect chance. The cops were already close to nabbing her, and that call gave them the push they needed. The suit guy with the badge nodded at me, just a tiny nod. I nodded back. We didn't need words, he knew I'd done my part. Linda didn't see it. She was too busy yelling. "I'm the HOA president," she said. "I make this place better. You can't do this." The cop sighed, like he was tired of her noise. "Ma'am, you're coming with us," he said. The other suit guy took her arm, gentle but firm. "Let's go," he said. Linda pulled back, but it didn't work. They were stronger. Neighbors were out now, standing on porches, peeking from windows. Mr. Carter leaned on his cane, watching with a little smile. Mrs. Lopez stood by her door, arms crossed, nodding like she'd known this was coming. Linda saw them and yelled louder. "You're all crazy. I didn't do anything wrong." But nobody believed her. They'd paid her fees, listened to her rules, and now they were done. The suits led her to the black car, opened the door, and guided her in. She kept shouting, but the door shut, and her voice got muffled. The cop walked over to me, slow and easy. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Thanks for coming quick." He tipped his hat a little. "No problem," he said. "She made it easy." He glanced at the sprinkler. "Nice work, by the way." I grinned. "Thanks," I said. He turned and headed back to his patrol car, leaving me alone on the porch. The black car started up, engine rumbling. Linda was in the back, banging on the window, but I couldn't hear her anymore. The suits got in, and the car pulled away, slow and steady. The patrol car followed, lights flashing but no siren. They turned the corner and were gone. The street went quiet again, just me, my sprinkler, and the sound of water hitting the grass. I took a deep breath, feeling good. It was over. Well, almost. See, this was the big moment, the climax, the reveal. Linda thought she was the queen of the neighborhood, catching me breaking rules. She didn't know I was the one catching her. I'd moved here undercover, worked with the cops, and used my sprinkler as a trick. Every time she peeked at me, every time she complained, I was one step ahead. Her 911 call was supposed to ruin me. Instead, it ruined her. The suits had been waiting for the right time, and she gave it to them on a silver platter. I sat down on my porch steps, finishing my lemonade. The sun was almost gone now, the sky turning pink and purple. My sprinkler kept going, steady and calm. Neighbors started coming out more, talking to each other, pointing at Linda's house. They were surprised, but happy too. Finally, I heard Mr. Carter say, "She's been trouble for years." Mrs. Lopez nodded. "Good riddance," she said. I waved at them, and they waved back, smiling bigger than before. This was it, the truth was out. I wasn't just Jake. I was the guy who helped stop Linda's scam. The cops had her now, and she'd have to answer for everything. My sprinkler? It was still here, doing its job, watering my grass. Linda hated it, but it had been my secret weapon. Without it, I couldn't have watched her so close. Without it, she might have kept stealing. Now, she was gone, and the neighborhood was free. But wait, there's more to tell. This was the big reveal, but what happens next? How do things settle down? Stick with me, friends, because the story's not done yet. Linda's out of the picture, but the neighborhood's about to change. And me? I've got a little more to do. Let's keep going, the next part's just as wild. Resolution and justice served. Alright, friends, let's keep the story rolling. We're at the part where everything settles down, or at least starts to. Linda was gone, hauled off in that black car with the suits, and the neighborhood was buzzing. I stayed on my porch, sipping the last of my warm lemonade, watching the street come alive. My sprinkler kept spraying, little drops sparkling in the fading sunlight. It was quiet for a second after the cars left, but not for long. Neighbors started stepping out, talking loud, pointing at Linda's house like it was a show. And me? I just sat there, feeling good. Justice was served, and I'd helped make it happen. The cop and the suits had taken Linda away, her voice still yelling even as the car door shut. "This is a mistake," she'd shouted, banging on the window. But nobody listened. The neighbors didn't care what she said anymore, they were done with her. Mr. Carter, the old guy with the cane, hobbled out to his porch first. He leaned on the railing, squinting down the street where the cars had gone. "Well, I'll be," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "She's finally gone." He had a little smile, like he couldn't believe it but was happy anyway. Mrs. Lopez came out next, her arms crossed tight. She stood by her mailbox, looking at Linda's house. "Good riddance," she said, nodding hard. "She's been bossing us around too long." A few other folks peeked out, some from windows, some from doors. Kids ran into yards, asking, "What happened? Where's Linda going?" The grown UPS whispered back, telling them bits and pieces. "She's in trouble," one lady said. "She took our money," said another. The kids didn't get it all, but they knew it was a big deal. I waved at Mr. Carter and Mrs. Lopez, nice and easy. "Hey," I called. "Everything okay?" Mr. Carter waved back with his cane. "Better than okay, Jake," he said. "You did something good here." Mrs. Lopez smiled too, a real smile, not the fake ones Linda used to give. "Yeah," she said. "Thanks, Jake." I nodded, feeling warm inside. They didn't know the whole story yet, but they knew enough. Linda was out, and they were free from her rules. The sun was almost down now, the sky turning dark blue with little streaks of orange. My sprinkler kept going, hissing soft and steady. I set my empty glass on the steps and stood up, stretching my arms. The air was cool, a nice breeze blowing through. I looked at Linda's house, lights off, curtains still, nobody home. It felt weird, like the street was holding its breath. For months, she'd been the loudest thing around, always yelling or knocking on doors. Now, it was peaceful. Quiet. Right. I walked to my yard, checking my sprinkler one more time. The water sprayed out in little arcs, wetting the grass. I'd built it with my own hands, pipes, tape, a hose, and it worked perfect. Linda hated it, called it ugly, but it was mine. And it had done more than water my lawn, it had helped me catch her. I smiled, patting it like it was a pet. "Good job," I said to it, quiet so nobody heard. Then I turned it off, twisting the knob until the water stopped. The yard went silent, just crickets chirping in the dark. Neighbors were still out, talking more now. A lady named Sarah, who lived next to Mr. Carter, walked over to him. "Did you see that?" she said, her voice excited. "They put her in a car. Cops and everything." Mr. Carter nodded. "Yep," he said. "She had it coming." Sarah laughed, short and sharp. "All those fees she made us pay, where'd they go?" Mrs. Lopez joined them, shaking her head. "Not to the playground, that's for sure," she said. "It's still a mess." They all looked at each other, like they were figuring it out together. I stayed by my sprinkler, listening. They were right, the playground was rusty, the street signs were old, nothing Linda said she'd fix ever got fixed. She'd taken their money, hundreds of dollars, and kept it. I knew because I'd seen the proof, bank papers, notes, sneaky meetings. I'd passed it all to the cops, bit by bit, until they had enough to grab her. That 911 call she made about my sprinkler? It was the last push they needed. She thought she was smart, but she just dug her own hole. A guy named Tom, who lived 3 houses down, walked over to me. He was big, with a beard, always wearing a baseball cap. "Hey, Jake," he said, stopping by my fence. "What's all this about? Why'd they take Linda?" I shrugged, keeping it simple. "She was stealing," I said. "HOA money." Tom's eyes got wide. "No kidding," he said. "How'd they find out?" I smiled a little. "Neighbors talked. Cops checked it. Took a while." He nodded, scratching his beard. "Wow," he said. "And here I thought she was just mean." "She was mean," I said, laughing a bit. "But sneaky too." Tom laughed with me, then looked at my sprinkler. "She sure hated that thing," he said. "Guess it didn't matter." I nodded. "Guess not," I said. He clapped me on the shoulder, friendly-like. "Good to have you around, Jake," he said, then walked off to join the others. I watched him go, feeling proud. They didn't know I'd helped the cops, not yet. But they liked me anyway. The night got darker, stars popping out in the sky. People started heading back inside, but not before a few more waves my way. "Night, Jake," Mr. Carter called. "Sleep well, Jake," said Mrs. Lopez. I waved back, saying, "You too." The street emptied out, and it was just me again. I grabbed my glass and went inside, locking the door. My house was small but cozy, wood floors, a big chair, tools scattered around. I liked it here. And now, it felt even better. The next morning, Sunday, the neighborhood was different. I woke up early, made some coffee, and stepped outside. The air was fresh, the sun just coming up. My sprinkler sat in the yard, quiet now. I didn't turn it on yet, wanted to enjoy the calm first. I sipped my coffee, hot and strong, and looked around. No Linda marching down the street. No clipboard, no yelling. Just birds singing and a soft breeze. It was nice. Then I heard voices. Mr. Carter and Sarah were out again, standing by his porch. I walked over, coffee in hand. "Morning," I said. They smiled. "Morning, Jake," Sarah said. "Big day yesterday, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Big day." Mr. Carter chuckled. "Never thought I'd see Linda in a cop car," he said. "Felt good, though." Sarah agreed. "She's been running this place like a queen," she said. "About time someone stopped her." We talked a bit more, just easy stuff. The weather, the grass, how quiet it was without Linda. Then Mrs. Lopez joined us, carrying a mug of her own. "Heard they're picking a new HOA boss," she said. "Meetings next week." Mr. Carter raised his eyebrows. "Really?" he said. "Who's it gonna be?" Mrs. Lopez shrugged. "Dunno," she said. "But it won't be Linda." We all laughed at that, a big happy laugh. It felt like a weight was gone. I went back to my house after a while, setting my coffee down. I grabbed my tools and headed to the yard. Time to turn the sprinkler on again. It was a sunny day, and the grass needed it. I twisted the knob, and water sprayed out, catching the light. I stood back, hands on my hips, watching it work. Linda was gone, but my sprinkler stayed. It had done its job, both jobs. Watering the lawn and helping catch a thief. By Monday, things were official. A letter came in the mail, typed up nice and neat. "Dear residents," it said. "Linda Grayson is no longer HOA president. She's facing charges for theft and fraud. A new leader will be chosen soon. Thank you for your patience." I read it twice, smiling. Charges that meant court, maybe jail. Linda wouldn't be back anytime soon. I stuck the letter on my fridge with a magnet, like a trophy. Neighbors were out all day, talking about it. Tom stopped by again. "Saw the letter," he said. Crazy, right? I nodded. Yeah, I said. Crazy. He looked at my sprinkler, still going strong. Guess she picked the wrong fight, he said, grinning. Guess so, I said. He laughed and walked off, leaving me to my yard. The week went on like that, quiet, happy, normal. People waved more, smiled more. Kids played in the street, not scared of Linda yelling at them. The playground didn't get fixed yet, but folks were already planning to do it themselves. No more fees, Sarah said one day. We'll use what we've got. I liked that. They were taking charge, making things better without Linda's rules. I kept my sprinkler running every morning, watching the grass turn green. It wasn't just a gadget anymore, it was a sign. A sign that I'd help fix something bigger than my yard. Linda had faced her consequences: cops, suits, a car ride she didn't want. She'd lost her power, her money, her big loud voice. And me? I'd earned respect. Not loud respect, not show-off respect, just quiet nods and smiles from folks who knew I'd done right. One day, Mrs. Lopez brought me cookies. For helping, she said, handing me a plate. I didn't say I'd worked with the cops, just took the cookies and said, thanks. She didn't need to know everything. Neither did the others. They were happy, and that was enough. I sat on my porch that night, eating a cookie, watching the stars. Linda was gone. Justice was served. And my sprinkler? It stayed right where it was, doing its job. Reflective or inspiring closing. So, what do you think, friends? Sometimes the quiet guy next door isn't who you think he is. And the ones who scream the loudest? They've usually got the most to hide. Tell me, ever had a Linda in your life? Drop it in the comments. And if you like this twist, stick around, there's more where that came from. Let's take a step back and think about this story for a minute. It's all done now, Linda's gone, the cops took her away, and the neighborhood's happy again. I'm sitting here on my porch, looking out at my yard, my sprinkler still sitting there like a little hero. The sun's gone down, the stars are out, and everything feels calm. It's a good feeling, knowing I helped make things right. But it's more than just a fun story, it's got something to say. Something big. And I want you to hear it, because it's the kind of thing that sticks with you. See, Linda was loud. She yelled, she pointed, she acted like she owned everything. She'd march around with her clipboard and her rules, telling everyone what to do. If your trash can was out too long, bam, she'd be at your door. If your flowers weren't perfect, wham, she'd write you up. She made people feel small, like they couldn't fight back. And for a while, it worked. Neighbors paid her fees, followed her orders, kept quiet. Why? Because she was noisy, and noisy people seem strong. They seem like they're in charge. But me? I was the opposite. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just waved and smiled, tinkering with my sprinkler like it was no big deal. People saw me and thought, oh, Jake's nice, but he's nothing special. That's what I wanted them to think. Being quiet doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're smart. It means you're watching, waiting, figuring things out. Linda didn't see me coming because I didn't make a fuss. I let her talk, let her call the cops, let her think she'd won. And then boom, the truth came out, and she was the one in trouble. That's the first big thing to learn here: quiet can be powerful. You don't have to shout to make a difference. Sometimes, the softest steps get you the farthest. Linda thought noise was her strength, but it was her weakness. Every time she complained about my sprinkler, she gave me more time to watch her. Every time she bossed someone around, they got a little madder, a little braver. She didn't see it, but I did. And the cops did too. Being quiet let me sneak up on her, like a shadow she didn't notice until it was too late. Think about your own life for a second. Ever met someone like Linda? Someone who's loud and pushy, always telling you what to do? Maybe it's a kid at school who brags all the time. Maybe it's a grown-up who thinks they're better than everyone. They talk big, act big, make you feel like you can't win. But here's the secret: they're not as strong as they look. People like that are usually hiding something. Linda was hiding her scam, stealing money, lying to neighbors. Her loud voice was a mask, covering up the truth. When the mask fell off, she had nothing left. Now think about the quiet ones. The kids who don't talk much, the people who just do their thing without making a scene. They're not always shy or scared. Sometimes, they're the ones paying attention. Sometimes, they're the ones who know more than they say. I was that guy in the story. I didn't need to yell, I had a plan. And when the time was right, that plan worked. So next time you see someone quiet, don't count them out. They might surprise you, just like I surprised Linda. Let's talk about my sprinkler for a minute. It wasn't pretty pipes taped together, a hose twisted on, water spraying all crooked. Linda called it an eyesore, said it didn't belong. But that ugly little thing was more than it looked. It watered my grass, sure, but it also helped me catch a thief. It was my excuse to be outside, watching Linda, gathering clues. Without it, I couldn't have stayed in my yard so much. Without it, the cops might not have got her. Something small and simple turned out to be super important. That's another big lesson, little things matter. You don't need fancy stuff to do something great. My sprinkler wasn't shiny or new, it was just pipes and tape. But it did the job. Maybe you've got something like that, a little idea, a small talent, something nobody else notices. Don't think it's too small to count. Use it smart, like I did, and it can grow into something big. Linda judged my sprinkler by how it looked. She didn't see what it could do. Don't let people judge you that way, show them what you've got. The neighborhood's different now. No more Linda banging on doors, no more weird fees. People wave at me, smile, say hi. Mr. Carter brought me a pie the other day just because. Mrs. Lopez keeps saying, "Good job, Jake," every time she walks by. They don't know I worked with the cops, not all of it, but they know I helped. They're happy, and that makes me happy too. We're fixing the playground ourselves next week, no HOA money, just neighbors pitching in. It's better this way. That's the last big thing to think about, standing up changes stuff. I could have ignored Linda's scam, kept my head down, let her keep stealing. But I didn't. I watched, I waited, I helped the cops. It wasn't easy, took weeks of sneaking around, writing notes, talking quiet to neighbors. But it worked. Linda's gone, and the street's free. If you see something wrong, don't just sit there. Do something, even if it's small. Tell someone. Ask questions. Be brave, even if you're scared. One little step can start something huge. So where does that leave us? Linda's facing jail, my sprinkler's still here, and the neighborhood's smiling again. I'm just Jake, quiet Jake with a goofy sprinkler, but I made a difference. You can too. You don't need to be loud or big or fancy. You just need to watch, think, and act when it's time. People like Linda, they'll always be around, yelling and hiding. But people like us? We can stop them. Not with noise, but with smarts. Tell me, friends, ever had a Linda in your life? Someone bossy, someone sneaky? Drop it in the comments, I want to hear. Maybe it's a bully at school, a loud cousin, a mean teacher. How'd you deal with them? Did you stay quiet or fight back? I bet you've got stories, and I'd love to know them. This tale's done, but there's more where it came from. Stick around, we've got lots to share. Before I go, picture this, it's night now, stars twinkling, my porch creaking under me. My sprinkler's off, sitting in the yard like a little champ. I'm eating one of Mrs. Lopez's cookies, chocolate chip, so good. The street's quiet, but it's a happy quiet. No yelling, no rules, just peace. I did that. Me and my sprinkler. And you? You've got your own sprinkler, something small, something yours. Use it. Be the quiet one who surprises everyone. Because sometimes, the softest voice wins the loudest fight. Reflective or inspiring closing, continued. Alright, friends, let's keep going. We're not done yet, not by a long shot. I've told you the story. Linda's gone, the cops nabbed her, and my sprinkler helped make it happen. The neighborhood's happy, waving at me like I'm some kind of hero. But there's more to say, more to think about. This isn't just a tale about a nosy lady and a quiet guy. It's about you, me, and everyone out there. It's about what we can do when we try. So grab a snack, sit tight, and let's dig deeper, because this ending's gonna stick with you. So, what do you think, friends? Sometimes the quiet guy next door isn't who you think he is. And the ones who scream the loudest? They've usually got the most to hide. That's what happened here. Linda was all noise, yelling, pointing, acting like the queen of the street. She'd storm over if your grass was too tall or your mailbox was crooked. Rules, she'd shout, waving her clipboard like a sword. Everyone listened because she was loud, because she made them feel like they had to. But me? I was quiet. I smiled, waved, fixed my sprinkler. Nobody thought much of me, especially Linda. And that's how I got her. Let's talk about that for a minute. Being loud doesn't mean you're strong. Linda thought it did. She'd huff and puff, call the cops, tell everyone what to do. She thought noise was power. But it wasn't. It was a trick, a way to cover up what she was really doing. Stealing money, lying, sneaking around, that's what her loud voice hid. Every time she yelled at me about my sprinkler, she was distracted. She didn't see me watching, didn't see me talking to neighbors, didn't see the cops closing in. Her noise was her downfall. Now look at me. I didn't shout back. I didn't argue. I just kept my cool, hands in my pockets, tinkering with pipes. People saw me and thought, oh, Jake's just a guy. Nothing big. That's exactly what I wanted. Being quiet let me sneak around, let me plan, let me win. Linda never saw it coming because I didn't give her anything to fight. No yelling, no fuss, just a smile and a wave. And when the time was right, bam, the truth hit her like a truck. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet can be the strongest thing of all. Think about that in your own world. Ever know someone super loud? Maybe a kid at school who's always bragging, always talking over everyone. Or a grown-up who bosses people around, acting like they're the best. They seem big, right? Hard to stop. But look closer. What are they hiding? Are they scared? Are they lying? Loud people want you to look at their noise, not their secrets. Linda was like that. She screamed so nobody would ask where the HOA money went. Next time you meet someone loud, don't just listen. Watch. You might see more than they want you to. Then there's the quiet ones like me in this story. I wasn't loud, wasn't flashy. I didn't drive a cool car or wear fancy clothes. Just jeans, a toolbox, and a goofy sprinkler. Linda thought I was nothing. Neighbors thought I was nice but boring. They were wrong. I was watching, thinking, working with the cops. My quiet wasn't empty, it was full of stuff nobody saw. Plans. Clues. Smarts. When the cops showed up, when Linda got caught, that's when they saw it. The quiet guy had power all along. You've got quiet people in your life too. Maybe a friend who doesn't talk much, just listens. Maybe a teacher who's soft but smart. Don't skip past them. They might not brag or shout, but they could be the ones who know the most. They could be the ones who change things. I changed this neighborhood not with noise, but with patience. Linda's gone because I stayed calm, because I waited for the right moment. Quiet power's real, friends. It's sneaky, it's strong, and it wins. Let's talk about my sprinkler again. It's sitting out there now, pipes all twisted, tape holding it together. Linda hated it, called it ugly, said it broke her rules. She wanted it gone, wanted me gone. But that sprinkler was more than junk. It watered my grass, sure, but it also kept me outside, kept me watching her. It was my trick, my cover. Without it, I couldn't have stayed in the yard so much. Without it, Linda might still be stealing. Something small, something simple, turned into something huge. That's a big deal to remember, little things can be mighty. My sprinkler wasn't fancy, no shiny parts, no big price tag. Just stuff I found and put together. But it did the job, 2 jobs, really. It helped my lawn and helped the cops. Linda laughed at it, judged it, missed what it really was. Don't do that in your life. Don't skip the small stuff. Maybe you've got a little talent like drawing stick figures or kicking a ball. Maybe you've got an idea nobody else gets. It doesn't have to be big to matter. Use it, grow it, and watch what happens. Picture this, the neighborhood's free now. No Linda, no clipboard, no extra fees. People walk outside smiling, not scared. Kids play in the street, not worried about her yelling. Mr. Carter waters his flowers in peace. Mrs. Lopez plants whatever she wants. They're fixing the playground next week, not with HOA money, but with their own hands. It's better this way, no bossy queen, just neighbors helping each other. I sit on my porch, watching it all, and it feels right. I helped make that happen, me and my sprinkler. That's the last big piece. Doing something good changes everything. I could have ignored Linda's scam. I could have moved here, fixed my house, and stayed out of it. But I didn't. I saw something wrong, money disappearing, neighbors grumbling, and I acted. It wasn't loud or fast. I watched her, wrote stuff down, talked to the cops. Took weeks, took patience, but it worked. Linda's facing jail, the street's happy, and I'm proud. One guy, one sprinkler, one plan, it flipped the whole place around. You can do that too. Maybe not with cops or sprinklers, but in your own way. See something mean at school? Say something. Notice a friend who's sad? Help them. Spot a bully like Linda? Stand up, even if it's quiet. It doesn't have to be a big fight, just a little push. I pushed Linda out by watching and waiting. You can push too, with whatever you've got. One small move can start a wave, and that wave can wash away the bad stuff. So here I am, friends, on my porch with the stars above me. My sprinklers off, resting in the yard. I'm eating a cookie Mrs. Lopez gave me, chocolate chip, warm and yummy. The street's quiet, but it's a good quiet. No slamming doors, no angry shouts, just crickets and a breeze. Linda's gone, her scam's done, and the neighbors are free. I did that. Quiet little Jake with his goofy sprinkler. And it feels awesome. What about you? Ever had a Linda in your life? Tell me in the comments, I wanna know. Maybe it's someone bossy, someone loud, someone who thinks they're the best. How'd you handle them? Did you stay quiet like me, or did you push back? I bet you've got cool stories, and I'd love to hear everyone. This tale's over, but there's more coming, twists, surprises, fun stuff. Stick around, because we're just getting started. Before I go, think about this, you've got power. Maybe it's loud, maybe it's quiet, but it's there. Linda didn't see mine until it was too late. Don't let anyone miss yours. Be the kid who surprises them, the one who does something great when they least expect it. My sprinkler was small, but it stopped a thief. What's your sprinkler? What's your move? Find it, use it, and watch the world change. Because sometimes, friends, the quietest ones make the loudest difference.